Now let's talk about macadamia nuts, and not in the casual, oh, it's just food kind of way. No, we're going to treat this with the seriousness it deserves. Because what you eat isn't just about taste, it's about the consequences that echo throughout your body, especially as you age. And macadamias, they may look innocent, but they carry a metabolic cost that your aging physiology is less and less equipped to handle. You see, macadamia nuts are extremely high in fat. Over 75% of their content is fat. And yes, much of it is monounsaturated, which we often consider good fat. But here's the rub. Context matters. The same compound that might be beneficial in a youthful, metabolically resilient body becomes problematic in a system that's slower, less efficient, and more prone to inflammation. As we age, our ability to metabolize fats, especially in large, dense amounts, diminishes. The mitochondrial function that once operated like a well-oiled engine now sputters. The enzymes that broke fat down efficiently become less active. And the result? You get a backlog. Energy that should have been used to store properly now becomes a burden. It accumulates, not just as visible fat, though that's part of it, but internally around organs, in the bloodstream, quietly, dangerously. And here's where it becomes even more insidious. The body begins to respond to that fat burden as if it's under attack. The immune system reacts. Low-grade inflammation creeps in, subtle at first. Fatigue, joint stiffness, mental fog, but it compounds day after day, year after year. And now you're not just dealing with a dietary preference, you're dealing with a cascade of metabolic dysfunction. But what's worse is the illusion of health. Macadamias are marketed as premium, luxurious, clean, and that makes it easy to overlook the harm because it feels like you're indulging in something healthy. That's the danger of misplaced assumptions. You're not just eating a nut, you're participating in a narrative that tells you this is fine when the data in your own aging physiology are screaming this is not fine. So what's the solution? It's not about fear, it's about responsibility. You have a duty to adapt, to recognize that your 70-year-old body isn't your 30-year-old body. The rules have changed, and pretending otherwise is an abdication of self-care. Rejecting macadamias, despite their taste, despite their elegance, is a small but meaningful act of wisdom. It says, I understand what I need now, not what I wanted then. That's discipline. That's maturity. And it's exactly the kind of clarity that leads to strength later in life, the kind that's earned, not given. So no, macadamias are not harmless. They are a stress test, one your body no longer needs to take. Choose differently. Choose wisely. Now, let's address peanuts. And this is where we need to stop playing games, because the truth about peanuts has been glossed over for far too long. They are not nuts. That's the first mistake, a categorical error. They're legumes, biologically speaking. They grow in the ground, not on trees. And that difference isn't just semantic. It carries significant consequences for how your body reacts to them, especially as you age. You see, the body is a system, not just a machine, but a delicate, reactive organism. And the older that system becomes, the more sensitive it is to triggers, to irritants, to subtle biochemical disruptions that go unnoticed in younger years. Peanuts contain compounds, lectins, mold-based aflatoxins, omega-6 fatty acids that are inflammatory by nature. These aren't myths. These are well-documented biological facts. Let's start with aflatoxins. These are toxic metabolites produced by molds that commonly grow on peanuts during storage. You might not taste them, but they're there. Microscopic, but consequential. They've been linked to liver stress, immune dysregulation, and in some long-term cases, even cancer. That's not fear-mongering, that's data. Then there's the omega-6 problem. Peanuts are loaded with omega-6 fatty acids, and while some are necessary, the modern diet, especially in Western culture, is flooded with them. Why does that matter? Because omega-6s in excess and without balance from omega-3s push the body toward a pro-inflammatory state. And inflammation, especially chronic low-grade inflammation, is the silent architect of nearly every age disease. Arthritis, heart disease, cognitive decline is not loud at first, but it compounds slowly, relentlessly. And as if that weren't enough, the lectins and phytates in peanuts interfere with nutrient absorption. They irritate the gut lining. That matters more than most people realize, because if your gut is inflamed, if it's leaking, if your microbiome is compromised, you're not just failing to absorb nutrients, you're triggering immune responses that throw the entire body out of balance. Seniors in particular can't afford that kind of disruption. Nutrient density and absorption become everything later in life, and peanuts actively work against that. But here's what's most dangerous. It's the familiarity, the comfort, the nostalgia. Peanuts are everywhere. Peanut butter, trail mix, snacks. They're cheap, they're easy, they taste like childhood. But here's the hard truth. Just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's harmless. In fact, it's often the familiar things, the things we don't question, that do the most damage over time. Yet you have to ask yourself, what am I clinging to? A flavor, a habit, an identity tied to something that no longer serves me? Letting go of peanuts isn't just a dietary choice. It's a symbolic one. It says, I'm willing to reevaluate what I thought I knew. That's humility. That's wisdom. And that's how you age with strength, not by repeating old habits, but by confronting them. Now let's talk about walnuts. Not just as a snack, not just as a source of nutrients, but as a decision, a small symbolic choice that reflects something deeper. Your willingness to protect your mind, to take seriously the responsibility of preserving your cognitive capacity as you age. You have to understand something fundamental here. The brain is not static. It doesn't simply degrade passively with time. It responds to the inputs you give it. What you think, how you move, and yes, what you eat. Neurons are living things, and like any living thing, they need the right environment to survive and grow. Walnuts, few foods support that environment better. They're rich in alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid. Now, why does that matter? Because omega-3s are not optional. They're structural. They're the lipids that make up your brain's very architecture. Think of your neurons like delicate wiring. These fatty acids are the insulation. Without them, signals get slower, misfired, damaged. And what happens when your internal wiring starts to falter? Memory slips, focus wanes, emotions become more volatile, and slowly you start to lose the clarity that once defined you. That's just the beginning. Walnuts are also loaded with antioxidants, polyphenols that actively fight oxidative stress, the same process that rusts metal, ages skin, and yes, erodes brain tissue. Your brain consumes a disproportionate amount of oxygen. That makes it especially vulnerable to oxidative damage. Walnuts don't just feed the brain, they defend it. And we're not talking theory here. There are longitudinal studies, rigorous peer-reviewed data showing that seniors who consume walnuts regularly show slower cognitive decline, better memory recall, sharper executive function. It's not a miracle. It's biology meeting behavior. Inputs matter. But beyond the chemistry, there's a deeper point, and this is where things become truly meaningful. Your mind is your last line of independence. When your body slows, when energy fades, when strength recedes, what remains is thought, judgment, memory, the ability to articulate what you believe and to remember who you are. That must be protected at all costs. And walnuts, something as simple, as humble as a handful of walnuts a day, is a step in that direction, a form of self-respect. It's easy to overlook, doesn't feel heroic, but that's the nature of wisdom. It's often quiet, subtle, a matter of discipline. Do you care enough about your future self, your children's memories of you, your ability to remain present, sharp, independent, to make a small daily effort in its defense? You're not just eating a nut, you're building a shield against decay, against loss, against forgetting who you are. Let's move now to something deceptively simple. Almonds, ordinary, unassuming, the kind of food that doesn't make headlines, doesn't come with hype. But that's precisely the point. Sometimes it's the quiet, consistent things that carry the most weight, especially when it comes to long-term health and stability. You have a responsibility not just to survive, but to maintain the integrity of your physical frame, your internal chemistry, and the quality of your sleep. And almonds, they speak to all three. Let's begin with the bones. As you age, your skeletal system becomes a silent battleground. You don't feel it until something breaks. But that brittleness, that weakness, it's been building for years, slowly, quietly. And here's what many people don't realize. Magnesium, calcium, and phosphorus, the very minerals that maintain bone density, are abundant in almonds. They're foundational, but if your diet is stripped of them, or if your body can't absorb them due to poor food choices elsewhere, you're walking toward fracture. Not metaphorically, literally. You cannot allow your body's framework to erode while you watch. You can't build wisdom if the body that carries it crumbles underneath it. A handful of almonds a day is a form of physical reinforcement. It's saying, I'm not going to let my structure collapse from neglect. And what about blood sugar? Almonds are a stabilizing force. We live in a world that tempts you toward chaos, spikes of sugar, crashes of energy, the roller coaster of poor dietary impulse. But almonds help flatten that curve. They slow the absorption of glucose. They blunt the impact of carbohydrate intake. They give your body a moment to breathe, to regulate, not react. And that matters more as you get older. Your insulin response doesn't snap back like it used to. The swings are harder, the consequences more serious. And if you ignore them, if you live in denial, you're gambling with your clarity, your circulation, your vision, your limbs. The cost is real, and the discipline to avoid that cost, often it looks like something as ordinary as choosing almonds over something processed, packaged, and spiked with sugar. And then, perhaps most underappreciated of all, is sleep, rest, the deep restorative kind, the kind that heals. And almonds help here too. They contain magnesium and tryptophan, both of which play roles in calming the nervous system, regulating melatonin, and supporting the parasympathetic response. They don't knock you out, they prepare you. They lay the biological groundwork for rest that is earned, not forced. And let's be honest, if you're not sleeping well, everything else falls apart. Memory, mood, metabolism. So no, almonds are not just food. They're a small act of order in a world pushing you toward disorder. And so the question becomes simple. Are you willing to take the small daily actions that hold your life together, or are you going to wait for it to fall apart before you act? Let's talk about pistachios. Yes, pistachios, the small green seeds hidden inside tough shells, the kind of thing most people pass over without a second thought. But if you pay attention, if you really examine what's in front of you, biologically, symbolically, even philosophically, you'll see they represent something far more powerful than just a snack. They represent the concept that what's good for you often takes effort to access, that health, real health, comes in layers, and that wisdom, even in nutrition, starts with observation. You see, pistachios are uniquely dense in compounds that support three of the most vital systems as you age: your vision, your digestion, and your heart. And each of those has a kind of moral implication, a truth embedded in biology. Well, let's start with vision. Pistachios are one of the only nuts that contain significant levels of lutein and zeaxanthin, two carotenoids found in the retina. They're not optional, they're protective. They shield your eyes from oxidative stress and blue light damage. As you age, macular degeneration becomes a real threat. It robs you slowly, not just of clarity, but of your independence, your ability to see faces, to read, to drive, to navigate the world. And what's so striking is that a small, consistent intake of these nutrients can slow that decline. Eating pistachios becomes, in this sense, an act of foresight, literally and metaphorically. Then there's the gut. Most people never think about it until it stops working properly. But your gut is a command center. It speaks to your immune system. It affects your mood. It controls how efficiently your body extracts value from food. Pistachios contain both fiber and prebiotics. They feed the healthy bacteria in your gut. They support regularity. They reduce inflammation. When your digestion works, your whole body benefits. But more than that, it teaches you something, that what you feed internally will shape how you feel externally. That's not just biology, that's truth. And finally, the heart. Pistachios are rich in phytosterols and potassium, nutrients that actively lower LDL cholesterol and support vascular function. Every heartbeat is an act of order. It's rhythm, discipline, structure, and pistachios support that order. They keep the rhythm clean, strong. You're not just avoiding heart disease, you're reinforcing the engine that drives every other system. And here's where the meaning deepens. You have this small, unassuming food, not flashy, not indulgent, but it supports your ability to see clearly, to digest life efficiently, and to sustain the very rhythm that keeps you alive. That's no accident. That's nature rewarding effort, subtlety, and attention to detail. So the question is, do you ignore what's inconvenient to crack open? Or do you choose deliberately to pursue what's quietly good for you? In that shell is strength. In that green seed is clarity. And if you have the discipline to choose it, it becomes part of you, day by day, cell by cell. Now there's something profoundly important to grasp here, and it might seem simple at first, almost too simple, but don't let that deceive you. Because it's often the smallest hinges that swing the biggest doors, especially in the latter stages of life. The margin for error narrows with age, but so too does the margin for improvement expand. What does that mean? It means that the right small change made consistently can shift the entire trajectory of your health. Take your choice of nuts, for example. On the surface, it seems trivial, a snack, a topping, something you barely think about. But that's the danger. We dismiss what's familiar. We assume that what we've done for decades must still be harmless. But your body now plays by a different set of rules. The metabolic system slows. Inflammation creeps in. Your resilience diminishes. And suddenly, the food choices that used to be benign start to act like slow poison or slow medicine. You switch out peanuts with their inflammatory load and mold risk, and you gain clarity, joint mobility, even emotional stability. You avoid macadamias, too rich, too heavy, and your digestion stabilizes. You replace those with almonds, and now you're feeding your bones, your blood sugar control, your sleep cycle. Pistachios support your gut, your vision, your cardiovascular health. Walnuts, they fuel your brain, not just today, but in a way that protects your very identity tomorrow. What's happening there isn't just nutritional, it's psychological, it's moral. You're saying, I will no longer treat my future self with neglect. You're choosing to believe that tomorrow is worth preparing for, even when no one is watching, even when the change is barely perceptible in the moment. That kind of responsibility adds up, day by day, choice by choice. That is the quiet path to health. Not flashy overhauls, not silver bullets, but steady refinement. And there's a deeper truth here, one that most people never acknowledge. When you make even a small improvement in one area of your life, especially your health, it creates an opening for progress elsewhere. You eat better, you sleep better. You sleep better, you think better. You think better, you relate to others with more patience. You move through your day with more presence. And suddenly your life is no longer ruled by decline, but by the possibility of renewal. That's the power of choosing the right nuts. It's not about food, it's about orientation, about whether you are facing toward growth or giving into decay. You don't need to transform everything overnight. But you do need to stop lying to yourself that small things don't matter. Because in the end, it's the small things, the quiet choices, that determine the quality of the years you have left. So now you're left with a choice. Not a grand, dramatic one, but a daily, quiet one. Will you continue defaulting to what's convenient, what's familiar, what's slowly eroding your strength? Or will you start today to choose differently? Not perfectly, not all at once, but intentionally. A handful of almonds instead of sugary snacks. Pistachios for the gut and heart. Walnuts for the brain. These aren't just dietary substitutions. They're acts of discipline, signals to yourself that your health still matters, that your future is still worth protecting. And understand this, the body remembers what you feed it. Every cell, every system, every function, it responds, it adapts. Over time, those responses shape who you are, how you feel, and what you're capable of. That's not theory, that's responsibility, the kind that cannot be outsourced. You can't turn back the clock, but you can decide right now not to waste what remains. You can make choices that reinforce life instead of slowly withdrawing from it. That's not just health, that's integrity. So start with something small, something real, something as simple as the nuts you reach for, because if you can change that and mean it, you've already begun to change much, much more.